Hello and welcome. This is JR Poetry and I am Jennifer Renee. Originally, I was going to discuss both priorities and building routines. However, as I was scripting the part of the video that would have been about building routines, I realized that this was going to become a very long video. So that's actually going to be the theme for next week. So like a little look ahead. So priorities. So one of the things that I did touch on the last video that I think a lot of creative types run into is prioritizing their own creations, right? So I feel like the main reason that we don't prioritize our creations mostly falls into two categories, right? The first being that's easy to convince yourself that it's not important. And then the second is really the fear of being seen, which the fear of being seen doesn't always prevent people from creating. Sometimes it simply prevents them from going public with their creations, right? But like, for example, if what you want to create is a platform like what I'm doing right here, that fear of being seen is going to stop you, right? I'll get more into that in just a bit, but the first one though is convincing yourself it's not important. If you're, your average, I'm just gonna say average American because that's where I live, that's the human experience that I am accustomed to. So, if you're your average American, you have to go to work every day, you have to make enough money to pay your rent, pay your utilities, get groceries, keep your car if you have a car, put gas in it, so on and so forth. And maybe have a little treats here and there so you can still feel like a human, right? Like streaming, getting McDonald's every now and then because you don't have the energy to cook every single day. A lot of people go to work and go to school. Many people have children. Many people have all three. And these are all things that, like, even if you don't have children, like maybe you have a family member you take care of. Maybe you have a bunch of pets. Maybe you have only one pet. Maybe you have health issues, right? So these four are all things that you can't just quit, right? You can't not prioritize your 9 to 5. You can't not prioritize the way in which you make money. You can't not prioritize school if you want to actually get good grades and make your investment worth it. You can't not prioritize people who depend on you, right? And then you also shouldn't, though many people do, not prioritize your health, especially if you have chronic health problems, right? So usually one of the things that goes to the wayside is creativity. To me, the biggest reason to commit yourself to creativity, even if it's hard and you have other things that are kind of like pulling at your attention, is, for starters, many people who have the urge to go down a creative path, even if it's privately, like as a hobby or whatever, it's this very strongly, it's this really strong tug because there's a part of you that kind of needs to do it, right? Many people who create have issues fully expressing themselves in other ways or feeling like they are fully expressed properly in ways that are considered less creative, right? So there's just a need to do it so you don't blow up inside your own head, right? The other reason is because for many people, also myself included, it just makes them happy. It makes you happy. And your happiness at the end of the day is actually very important. Okay. There is a company, I was just listening about this yesterday. I believe they're called Ina Foods. They're located in Japan, right? And the first day of work, The CEO basically shows every single new employee a 100-year calendar. And he says, somewhere on this calendar is the date in which you are going to die. And if I can find an image of it, I'm going to put it somewhere on this video. But just the idea of like having to pause and reconcile with your own mortality, right? Knowing that you cannot consistently put something off. You can't just keep saying tomorrow, tomorrow, tomorrow. Now, again, that brings into, like I said earlier, your health is important. Your creativity is important, especially if it makes you happy, especially if it assists in your mental health, right? Doing things that prioritize our happiness usually intersect with other aspects of our life that we simply can't put down. So again, health, your mental health. Creativity usually does a lot to keep someone's mental health at least somewhat in check. Even if what you're creating is not the happiest of themes and tones, it's still a way in which you are getting whatever you're feeling inside of you out, so it doesn't find places in your bones to live and just grow inside of you, right? If we are looking at it from the point of like people who depend on us and who are taking care of us, we can't always tell the people around us that we love every little thing we are thinking and feeling, not if we value those connections. Now, that's not to say that we don't be honest with people, but sometimes if we're feeling a large emotion and it's sometimes healthiest to just express it in other ways, or at least use creativity as a way to work through it so you can suss out how to express yourself in actuality to the people around you, okay? That's another, I think, very good argument for prioritizing our creativity. School, a lot of times, depending on what you're studying, you're gonna have to take a class that has something to do with the creative arts, right? For most BA programs, AA programs, MA programs, MFA, you need something for it to be considered a well-rounded education. I think that still counts with a BS, just not as, with a BS, you're probably looking at one or two throughout your entire university career rather than it being like 3 or 4, maybe 5. So again, creativity is going to automatically come into play there. So you may as well actually practice it outside of classes so that you can perfect it and polish it for whatever class you could end up using it for. When I was going to HSU, I wrote a lot just because, I don't know, I feel like especially with the writing arts, there was an essay that got talked about where they were talking about how writers and poets are among some of the most logical and analytical thinkers, which I think is funny because a lot of people would tell you I'm not terribly logical, that I'm actually quite emotional, but that is neither here nor there. But I wrote a lot because, I'm in classes and it's just, I don't know if it's my creative brain or if this is common with creative brains. I would be taking like, let me see if I can remember any of the things I was taking. I was taking an intro to Shakespeare class while I was also taking a poetry class, while I was also taking a class. It was called Living Religions, but it was about us looking back on every single war we ever waged as a country, for better or worse, essentially. Like looking at it critically, both sides of it, and trying to understand what people were thinking at the time, right? So to me, there's a lot of intersectionality between the things I was learning and the themes that would pop up. And I think when you enter the creative nexus, you are allowing yourself and opening yourself up to lean into seeing connections that are not necessarily easy to see for people who are not as creative. And it almost becomes like just part of your due diligence to make these connections known. You don't even have to make them beautiful necessarily, but to make them known and put it out into the universe so that society can see that no one aspect of our lives exists within a vacuum, right? And that's kind of also what I'm getting at with this discussion here, which is that any argument you could make that creativity is not important, or your creative hobbies or creative passions are not important, any argument you can make, if you think hard enough about it, you can also make a counter argument, because nothing exists in a vacuum. No aspect of our lives is compartmentalized to the point that it doesn't touch and affect other parts of our lives. Going to the job thing, we're like, oh, I can't create, I have to go to this job, I have to have all my energy for this job. If you're working a job you hate, you need to be creating for two reasons. The first, so that you can hopefully eventually get away from a job that you hate, or even if it's a job that you just know you don't want to do forever. Work towards your creative goals. And you're not going to make money at first. I haven't made a dime yet, but I've been published 6 times by small presses, and I simply look at it as building a portfolio. Anything that you create at first, there's not usually going to be monetary compensation, but you are creating the portfolio, you are creating the reputation, you are creating the platform, you are basically doing the equivalent of an internship. The only difference is that the person you're getting coffee for is you, okay? And then the other thing too is, even if you aren't trying to make money with your creativity, you know, a lot of jobs come with frustrations. They come with things that you don't love. Like, anyone who works in customer service will tell you how much that aspect of work can just suck. Like, it's totally like wonderful when we have grateful, kind, nice people that come in and seeking, somewhere to eat, or, retail, or like some other service that people provide. But oftentimes you're going to run into at least one person a day who just, if you let them, they ruin your day, kind of thing. And a lot of those kinds of jobs come with, corporate conglomerates where the higher you go up that ladder, the more removed you feel from the people above you, the people who make the rules by which you have to conduct yourself, and by which you can deal with the day-to-day aspects of your job. I feel like I'm not saying that very well, but what have you. If you've worked customer service, you know what I'm trying to say, okay? And if nothing else, your creative outlets are exactly that. They're an outlet. They give you some way in which to express your frustrations, or even better, to pay more attention to the things around you that are beautiful. The dandelion that's, turning white and its pieces are fluttering away, the yellow butterfly in the distance, the height of a redwood tree, your child's smile, the embrace of a loved one, a sunset. They help you to pay more attention to the beautiful things if you can get yourself to focus on that lens, right? And then, like, even if you don't create for yourself, right? If you need an outside reason, if I haven't given you one at this point, art keeps us human. And I know everyone says that. Everyone talks about humanity versus AI right now, but it's so true. That's why we keep talking about it. That's why we feel such a disconnect in the age of AI from the overly curated and overly perfect images that AI creates, which has no soul. And you can see when something has no soul, when something doesn't feel, right? being human is feeling and connecting. And I think we have in many ways gotten away from that. Just like, not that I was gonna go there in this video, but like, just look at the way the opposing sides of the political divide in America, just America, look at the way they talk about each other. It's terrible. It's dehumanizing. It's like, and I do it too, okay? Because like things have gotten so extreme, and to a degree, the reason that they talk about each other in that way is it's coming from a place of fear and misunderstanding. And it's easier to deal with anger than it is to deal with fear. But if we can get back to feeling, if we can get back to empathizing, the divide can slowly shrink. I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on that idea. Like, that's a thought. That's something for you to sit with. I think any divide really could shrink with feeling and communication and connection and empathy. And art and creativity sometimes gets us there better than a conversation does. And I don't know why. I don't know why it works like that. I just know it does. And the biggest evidence of that is music. You will be hard-pressed to find a human being who does not enjoy music. And most people can name a song that changed their perspective or changed their lives or opened up their mind to something. Okay. Poetry, literature, visual art, dance, film, theater, food, ceramics, I don't care. Like, it all works the same way, right? And then the second reason, the fear of being seen, right? I literally guarantee you that every single creator you know or consume or have consumed has struggled with this. The fear of being seen, the fear of being misunderstood, the fear of what I create, I put something out there and it flops. What if I create and I put something out here and people hate it? What if they misunderstand what I'm trying to say? This, then, the third. I'm gonna tell you two things to help free you from this fear. The first thing is that at the end of the day, once you create something, put it out into the world, it's no longer yours, it belongs to the world. And you have to just let it go. You have to be okay with being misunderstood. There's people in your life who don't understand you, who don't like you, and you have no control over that. And I guess that's one thing when you don't deal with the public in the sense of like putting something out that literally the whole world can see, right? But it's also just very freeing to do it. Yeah, we are afraid of being misunderstood, but the reality is that if we refuse to allow ourselves to be seen, we will never be understood, because we will never put ourselves out there in order for someone else to vibe with us, in order for someone else to be like, hey, I totally get you. I have that experience too. I have those thoughts and feelings too. And then the other thing is that when we live our lives afraid of being seen, we tend to practice that in other aspects of our lives. We tend to practice the constant wearing of a mask around people, making ourselves smaller, more palatable for the people around us, filtering ourselves, editing ourselves, And it's just the line between like little white lies and inauthenticity, it's thin. It is paper thin. And an inauthenticity ultimately is one of the greatest acts of self-betrayal that we can perform. And again, that interrupts our path to happiness. And I think by being loving towards ourselves and by being compassionate towards ourselves, it becomes easier to then share these things with other people. And it becomes easier to practice those skills with other people. Going back to like discussing how, you know, there's a lot of people looking at each other in an inhumane way. What that really boils down to is people can only meet you as deeply as they've met themselves, right? So if a person does not have the courage and the authenticity and the compassion to really sit with their own feelings, they're going to have an incredibly limited tolerance for somebody else's viewpoints and feelings. And I know I've talked about a lot of things at this point that seem like they've gotten way off track of like why creativity and creating is important and should be a priority. But I promise you, if everyone was a little creative, if everyone did something simply for the joy of it, the world would heal quite a bit. Okay. All right. I'm gonna get off of that tangent now. So let me look back at my little agenda. Okay, yes. All right, so opportunities I've noticed in the last week, given that this is a new venture of mine, I have not been paying as much attention as I should have up to this point. That will get better over time. So I think what I'll do is I'm just going to mention to you like 2 opportunities that I've noticed that are more static, and then 2 that are just like really good resources for you to have if you're creative. So Broken Sleep Books, which I will link their page down below, they are accepting nonfiction prose of up to 150 pages until August 31st. They do prioritize person of color, LGBTQ, and working class writers over more established white straight male writers, right? So I believe you can submit directly to them. Again, I will link that down below, and when you go to their page, you can see they accept other kinds of writing too, just at different parts of the year. So you'll be able to see what else they accept and when those opportunities would be opening up for you if you're a writer but not a nonfiction writer. The other one is Midsummer Dream House. Again, gonna link them down below. Based on what I've seen both on their website and on Submittable, they're always accepting something for one publication or another. That's not terribly common, actually, for a press to constantly be accepting on an almost nonstop basis. It is a $7 fee to submit, and they do not pay. However, I'd say they're midway in terms of notoriety and readership. I mean, if you can get your work into their publications, you're going to have a few more eyes on it than you would some other smaller presses. So I think it would still be worth it. And then I mentioned earlier Submittable. The other one I'm going to mention is Chill Subs. So Submittable and Chill Subs. Those are 2 resources you need to have if you're a creative. Submittable is a bit more broad of a spectrum. I've seen things on there for visual art, I've seen things on there for video, all sorts of writing, music, I believe, photography, and I'm sure other things. But because I mostly deal with print media, I've mostly seen like the ads, I guess, for print media-esque items. But I think they do a little bit of everything. If you practice it, they, publicize it basically. Chill Subs is much more strictly written, okay? But these are two resources you really need to have in your back pocket in terms of finding places to submit your work to. Chill Subs gives you quite a bit more information, including like if a publication tends to be a paid one, how much they tend to cost, how picky they tend to be, stuff like that. Submittable is a little less informative, but I think again the pro there is that they offer a much broader range of different mediums that people practice. Literally, if you constantly go to those two sites, you could probably literally skip this segment of my video every week and I would not even be mad. As I said before, I'm not gatekeeping shit. Like, if I find something and I think it's useful, obviously I don't have the ability to share every single thing I come across, but I will share a few things every video and I will do my best not to repeat things, okay? My thought for this segment is that you guys hear about the resources. If it's a medium that you practice, you write it down and you now have that information forever, right? So those are those. A local thing happening, A Reason to Listen is going to start doing their monthly poetry reading at the historic Eagle House in Old Town in Eureka. If you live in Eureka or can drive to Eureka, they're going to do their first one on September 10th, I believe around 6 p.m. It's a $7 entry. I've never been to their poetry reading, so I'm not sure what the entry fee covers. Probably the use of the space is probably what that ends up covering. So that's exciting. They're going to be doing it, I believe, the second Thursday of every single month from this point forward. So again, if you live in the Eureka area, if you can get to the Eureka area and you like poetry and you like local poets, A Reason to Listen at the historic Eagle House. A poem I recently listened to, I actually listened to it yesterday. It wasn't the first time I'd ever heard it. But it made me cry this time when I was listening to it. I was listening to it on my lunch break. And the poem is My Gender is the Undoing by Andrea Gibson. Normally I would be reading these poems to you if I have them access to it. Because the poem is currently published on YouTube by Button Poetry, I'm actually just going to link the video. Hopefully I can figure out how to add videos to my video and it can just pop up. So it's partially, I just don't want to get in trouble with anyone, copyright infringement, anything like that. It's also because My Gender is the Undoing is a really beautiful poem about both coming to the point in which one decides to authentically be themselves. And it is about trans identity. And one of the things that I would like to do as a creative and how do I put this? Being a cis white woman, I want to be aware of when a story is for me to tell versus for me to witness. I can relate in certain ways to having to perform gender and the breath that you take when you no longer perform it. I can relate to that insofar as I against this white woman, but I, for a long time, struggled with my own femininity and feeling as though I was feminine, beautiful, desirable, what have you. I can relate to it to that point, to that degree. However, I cannot fully understand and appreciate what Andrea Gibson is trying to portray to the public, what they talk about when they go into the poem. What I can do is I can deeply empathize with the pain the pain and frustration, really, and then again that exhale towards the end. I can relate to that. I can empathize with it, and I can cry when I hear it because I understand some of those feelings, but it's not my story to tell. So that's one of the things you will run into with this channel. I don't know how any of you feel about it, but yeah, if I have a poem I want to share with you guys, it's more my story to witness rather than my story to tell, or it's a story for me to witness rather than for me to tell, and I have the ability to just post the original, and I just think it's better hearing it from Andrea, honestly. That's what I'm gonna do instead. So yeah, again, gonna link that. And then I am going to share my own poem, not after that poem, but I'm going to share a poem that I had written on my dad's birthday this past year, actually, around the time that my recent 1.5 year long relationship ended. I'm gonna share a poem of mine every week. However, most of the time my poem is going to be in response to the exact prompt that I give you guys for creativity. And it's often going to be a rough draft. I will tell you guys when something isn't a rough draft, but again, I do believe in the sharing of first drafts, the beginnings, knowing what something looks like when it hasn't yet been polished. I truly think that makes art much more accessible in that way. So let me just scroll down here. Okay. Look at you, wearing boots and your bare skin as if the two could be the best of friends, walking carelessly over the water with all the whimsy of a rain cloud, unsure of when it'll tip over, basing all of your twirls and tears on vibes alone. Look at you, eating a burger by yourself in that restaurant that opened months ago, talking to your father's ashes as if he was still alive for the candles you light every year, knowing at this rate he'll make 120 years old. Look at you, picking sheets to match your favorite comforter, previously stripped away because it didn't fit two of you, but now you know the two of you didn't fit each other much better than puzzle pieces crammed because it's just so close. But in the end, it simply doesn't finish the picture. Look at you, honoring your ancestors in the bright new moon with the same hands that once pulled shards from your veins, and now you turn broken glass into something that can still fit inside your chest with patience. Look at you, finally using love as a verb. So that was that poem. I do welcome comments, critiques, whatever you think. Just don't totally rip my throat out, I guess, is really all I ask. And then the prompt for you guys is, again, doesn't have to be poetry, does not have to be a written word. If you make, regular art, visual art, you dance, whatever, you make music. The prompt is to create about the ways in which you perform for others, reclaiming your happiness, and or the moment you stopped self-betraying. And that is it for this week. If this resonated with you, if this is something you want to keep coming back to, like, comment, subscribe. And if you are also creative and you post your stuff anywhere at all, let me know so I can support you. Little fly. um, and witness your journey. Have a wonderful week and be really kind to yourself and keep creating. Bye.